Kimberly Guilfoyle, Juan Williams, Pete Hegseth, and Kennedy. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Minnesota Senator Al Franken's political future remains uncertain as he faces an ethics probe in the Senate and growing calls for his resignation in the wake of sexual misconduct allegations. President Trump weighed in on the scandal via Twitter today. He says the Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Where does his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while she sleeps? And to think that just last week he was lecturing anyone who would listen about sexual harassment and respect for women, Leslie Stahl tape. Today, the White House addressed criticism of that comment, some calling it hypocritical for the president to tweet about Franken and not about Roy Moore.
He has weighed on Roy Moore. He did it while he was on a foreign trip in Asia. I did it repeatedly yesterday. In fact, I took about 15 questions on that topic and only one on Al Franken. So to suggest that this White House and specifically that this president hasn't weighed in is just inaccurate and wrong.
So, Kimberly, I don't blame reporters for asking about what seemed like an inconsistency there. But the answer is what it is. She's basically saying, I think that they're sticking to their guns. They're not going to comment on it, and they don't police his Twitter. He does it himself. But I don't blame the reporters for asking. What do you think?
They've got to ask the question, of course, and I think the answer is kind of consistent with how they've handled things. I mean, she's got to do her job, and it's got to be under the direction of the president. He really kind of speaks his own mind. His tweets speak for themselves. He's telling you how he feels, and yes, you could say, well, he's commenting on one, but not on the other. So, of course, the other side is going to say this appears to be, you know, an inconsistency. But I will say this. The distinction, I think, with the Al Franken case, just from speaking like a prosecutor, when you look at the facts and the evidence in front of you, there is an actual photographic picture that shows what transpired. She came out and gave the statement. He admitted it, apologized, essentially. So it's less of a due process issue as to exactly what happened and so many years ago, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's more persuasive, compelling evidence, perhaps, a little further along in the process.
Well, that was one of the things, Juan, that also came up in the briefing when the question about that Al Franken had apologized for allegations, and allegations against others are just still allegations, which is why the attack was worthwhile. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think there's much in the way of saying that there's an equivalence here because, to my mind, there's a photograph of Al Franken. I guess he's positioning himself as if he's touching this woman. But we have a tape from '05 of President Obama bragging about what he does with women. If he finds them attractive, just kiss them, grab them.
I don't think you meant to say President Obama.
I'm sorry. I meant to what?
You accidentally said President Obama.
Oh, no, I meant President Trump.
I was going to say, wow.
But you had all of us were paying a lot of attention.
My brain is flipping out.
We thought you were breaking news right now.
No. President Obama. President Trump. I can't stop. And then you have, the idea, 16 women who've said that President Trump was aggressive with them or violated them in some way. And we've never gone through all that. But clearly, President Trump thinks that stuff has been dealt with. It's in the past. The American people elected him president, and he is not subject to it. But I just thought it was incredibly unwise of him to open this door. It was Pandora's box that he just opened.
Throwing stones from a glass house.
Yeah.
Well, the Democrats have circled around and, for the most part, backing Al Franken. Take a look at this.
Unwanted sexual advances, groping or harassment are never okay. They're never acceptable, never funny. I think an ethics investigation is absolutely appropriate. He's worked with me and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. But this kind of conduct is totally unacceptable, abhorrent, and repugnant. And I think Al Franken's apology recognizes it.
Sexual harassment is inappropriate in every circumstance, in every way, whomever is involved. So let's start with that. And I do support that there should be an ethics investigation, and we'll see where that ends up.
This kind of behavior has been swept under the rug for too long. I will tell you, in general, there is absolutely no place for that kind of behavior in the United States Congress.
So, Pete, they're okay with they accept the apology. They want an investigation, and other than that, it seems like there might not be anything more that happens. Unlike other places, like just this week, NPR's CEO had to step down after allegations that made people uncomfortable, and then he actually lost his job. So it's inconsistent all across the board, depending on whatever industry you're looking at.
Very much so. There is no consistent standard. You look at
Republicans and Democrats, though, the double standard is rampant. I mean, maybe the president hasn't called for Roy Moore to step down, but how many Republican senators have?
True.
Dozens of them telling him to leave the race or
43.
be unseated. Of course. How many Democratic senators have called for Al Franken to resign? Zero at this point. And what are they calling for? An ethics committee investigation. Those senators called for it. Chuck Schumer has called for it. Durbin, Klobuchar, McCaskill. Even Franken himself is saying, investigate me in the ethics committee. A couple of facts about the Senate Ethics Committee.
He really doesn't like himself.
No. He does like himself, and he wants to preserve himself, because here's what the Senate Ethics Committee does.
like
Over the last...
I knew what you were saying.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I'm a little
You gotta
slow
be
in the
quick on
uptake.
the five.
I know, I'm sorry about that. I'm warming up here. In the last decade, the Senate Intelligence Ethics Committee has investigated 613 allegations in this committee. 613 allegations over the last decade. 75 investigations, all anonymous, no consequences.
Wow.
Not a single senator has yet to be found
Wow.
any sanctions against. So, yeah, investigate
wonder
me,
what they do
because
in their
I'll be
committee
found
meetings.
innocent no matter
Right.
what.
That
It's a
doesn't sound
sham.
like-
It's the swamp at work to
Now,
protect
I
themselves.
realize that this isn't a math-heavy show.
Try us. I mean, you're from Fox Business and all, so just.
But it appears as though instead of a zero tolerance policy, there is a 100% tolerance policy.
Yes.
If there is no punishment or no responsibility meted out to any one of these people.
100% posturing policy.
Now, what's really interesting here is this entire thing, if they end up backing Al Franken, which I imagine they're going to. I imagine, this is all a big dog and pony show. They've been given their talking points. They have to say blah, 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 ethics investigation, blah, 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 including Al Franken has to say the same thing, because otherwise, if they don't do anything, it completely neuters their argument against the president. And that's one of the favorite Democratic talking points about the president is his past, political correctness, where does it end? I also think that the president, I agree with you, he should be tweeting about Roy Moore, and he's got a political leg to stand on because he can say, and he loves being right, I was the one who backed Luther Strange. That was a much better choice. If y'all had listened to me, you wouldn't be in this pickle. So
And when he tweets,
no
he
more.
should definitely do the Y''ALL, like you just said it.
Absolutely
The y'all,
right.
I think it would go down really
Y'all.
well.
But
Yeah,
you know,
and I think he should also take
Let me
that.
just-
So that
let
way,
me just
every
ask-
reporter that has to read the tweet will have to say y'all.
Yep.
That's true. Find a lot of
Maybe
joy
they
in
could
that.
also say, bless your heart, to all the Republicans out there who want to make a false equivalency between the charges against Moore dealing with a 14-year-old girl and the charge or allegation here against Senator Franken.
No, it's
Allegations
not
on
just an
both
allegation.
sides.
He confirmed that it happened.
Well, yeah, no. I'm saying, well, the idea is pictured that he's actually groping the woman. He's pretend. I don't know if he's
It's
pretending
a
or looking,
mime
or whatever.
grope, at least
But
in the
there's a
picture.
big difference between what Al Franken is being charged with and what we know about.
I think
the
you're
charges
absolutely
against
right. I think that's right, and I think there's an important distinction to be made there.
And I also think that that's why what Pete's saying is true, Kimberly, which
Yeah.
is that 43 U.S. senators have said no more. And also, President Trump is head of the Republican Party. The Republican National Committee has withdrawn funds from the race. So in a way, I think that it was something they could have said at the briefing today, which is that the party has spoken.
The party has spoken.
That's what they
and-
could have said.
Yeah, so it's been handled, and the party has spoken very loudly and also with their financial power, and they've pulled that back. So I think there has been a very swift and judicious response from the Republicans, and I think it is clear that there's hypocrisy on the part of the left and the Democrats. I mean, again, Juan, this guy, he didn't say I didn't do it, or it isn't me, or it's my doppelganger in the photo. He's like, I'm sorry, I did it, okay, and that's that.
But maybe
But
like
but
with
I
Roy
think there's
Moore.
a big difference. Let me say, I think there's a big difference between Roy Moore and Senator Franken. But
You mean the
But why do
nature
you
of
get
the
to make that choice?
allegations?
well, both the nature of the allegations, but here's what's going on, Kimberly.
is?
It's
if they're
become
more
like a
with Al
team
Franken?
sport. It's like, oh,
And the
there's a
Democrats are the worst
Republican.
team.
If you're a Republican, oh, we'll find a way to say, don't say anything about it. But it's a Democrat. Oh, let all hell break loose. This is ridiculous.
It's the
This is
exact
so hypocritical.
Democrats say they're the party of women, and the Republicans are committing a war on women. Yet when someone comes out with actual evidence, they say Senate ethics
What are you
investigation
talking
is gonna
about?
go nowhere.
Do you know
the
Donald
photograph.
Trump?
What about in the
evidence
tweet?
about Donald Trump?
First of all, it's an audio
and
about
let me just-
saying something as opposed to doing
and
something, which Al
and
Franken
these
has
women,
admitted to
these
doing.
women,
In addition to
he-
jokes about
the
rape
women,
on Saturday Night
11
Live.
women,
Okay,
11.
let me
and
ask
let me
you-
just say to Kimberly, the GOP of Alabama is still backing Roy Moore. Steve Bannon is still backing Roy Moore.
Okay, well,
Sean
Steve-
Hannity
Steve-
is still backing
Shouldn't
Roy
Steve Bannon
Moore.
is an individual citizen. He can do whatever he wants.
Well, I'm
He's his
just
own
saying,
man to make his own
where
decisions
all of
about
a
it.
sudden then is your outrage at the Republicans for
But I
continuing
think-
to support Roy Moore?
No,
But
I'm not
Juan,
gonna
I
have
do think
individual
that
and
there is a
specific
distinction
outrage.
there. The state GOP, yes, you're right. And look, they'll have to deal with the consequences of that if they lose the race. And also just morally. But the RNC, of which the president oversees, did withdraw funds
bigger deal.
from Roy Moore. And I think that that is a statement. But my only point was that today, one of the things that they could have said at the White House is that we have spoken, money speaks loudly, we are not supporting this race.
That would have been better. But, you know, it's even interesting to me, Ivanka, the first daughter, comes out and says there's a special place in hell for people who abuse children.
Yeah.
Breitbart comes out and says, oh, Ivanka should shut up. She has no place, no standing to say, I think, what is going on?
That's a difference. I think everyone has the right to say something. If you are offended, if you are outraged, if you are moved by something, and she's a mom, and she may have a different perspective than other people. Right. She absolutely has a right to say that. She's not saying, you people of Alabama absolutely have to force him out of the race, and we have to do everything in our power. She's not affecting the race. She's expressing an opinion, and I think that is...
That's exactly right. And why does Juan Williams get to decide, or any politician in Washington, D.C.? Let the voters in Alabama decide. Let the voters in Minnesota decide whether they want that person representing them. That's, I think, what so many people reject. It's these elites who are hypocrites themselves, telling them what they need to do.
Well, I think that one of the reasons the RNC pulled out, though, is because everyone will be tarred with it and stained with, and every single ad going into 2018 and into 2020 will be tied to him. And I think that was the attempt initially, was say they believe the women were credible from the Washington Post piece. There have been more to come. There might be still more to come on the Al Franken story, and the congressional story is not over.
Sure.
Right.
So, and there are gradations of all of this. There are victims to be considered. Like, we don't talk a lot about them.
But there are cultural and political ramifications for both parties.
Sure.
Neither side wants to be the one who doesn't deal appropriately with sexual harassment claims. I think it's a bigger gamble for the Democrats, who've really taken the high road in some of these cases that hit awfully close to home.
No, but you're saying it's because the Democrats have stood up for women's rights, especially pro-choice and the other.
Well,
and that's what you're saying. That opens them to charge.
Guess what?
Unless they're taking money from Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
Right, but they're not. And I mean, gosh,
They
seems
have.
to me the Democrats, no, they returned a lot of that money. Even now they're returning money from Al Franken and Al Franken's committee. Yeah, but what I was saying is the reason that the Breitbart guy was telling Ivanka Trump, the first daughter, to shut up was because it opened the door, just as President Trump did last night with his tweet, to people like me saying, hey, wait a second, are you guys forgetting the charges against Donald Trump?
The door's already been wide open on that. That's been litigated for a year.
We get to talk about this again in the B blog, so there's more, because some Democrats are now revisiting the past accusations against Bill Clinton in the wake of all the new misconduct scandals. That's where this all started. Details next.
In a small town, I see our friends, and they put on a show like they don't want me to roll the dice. Feel the fear in my enemy's eyes. Listen as the crowd.
The new accusations against Al Franken have forced his party to address other skeletons in its closet. Listen to this quote from McClatchy. Democrats called Al Franken's behavior unacceptable and hinted that they'd eventually demand he resign. Anything less would risk catastrophe for a party that stakes its political reputation on fighting for women, especially one that is just now 20 years after the fact, grappling with its unyielding support of Bill Clinton. Some Democrats, like New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, are no longer trying to cover for the former president.
Is it your view that President Clinton should have stepped down at that time, given the allegations?
Yes, I think that is the appropriate response. But I think things have changed today, and I think under those circumstances, there should be a very different reaction.
Goodness gracious. It's coming back to rear its ugly head. So what do you make of this, Kennedy? You're seeing some people taking a step out. You saw Chelsea Handler saying, apologizing. You see now Kirsten Gillibrand saying, wait a second, we've got to take a look at this. What do you make of
Lena Dunham made this a point, at least privately, to some very influential Hillary Clinton donors during the campaign cycle. I think that this is all a concerted effort, along with Donna Brazile and Joe Biden, to take Hillary Clinton down, say she doesn't even think of running for president again, because she was the one who helped vilify these women, and they destroyed Monica Lewinsky's reputation, and they made her out to be the villain in this case, although obviously she's not the one who held the power. The most powerful man in the world was the one who preyed on her, not to mention the other women who came forward. And Juanita Broderick responded to Chelsea Handler this week with a tweet of her own when Handler tweeted about Roy Moore.
Yeah. Okay. So Dana, now this really seems like it's getting a little bit of momentum, and they actually are having kind of a moral and ethical crisis that they have to confront. Nate Silver was even.
I just feel like though that it's super politically convenient at this point, because I was telling Pete in the break. So in 1997, when this broke, I think I was 23. I was working on Capitol Hill for a Republican member of Congress. And we were working on the balanced budget amendment and welfare reform, all this stuff. And then this happens. And I remember being so upset that you couldn't see any of the Democrats, women's groups, coming out to defend Monica Lewinsky. And even now, with these current allegations, like if it's a Democrat that is accused, then the Republicans seem to automatically believe all of those accusers. If it's a Republican that's getting accused, immediately the Democrats believe all of their accusers. But now you get to a point where Senator Gillibrand says, well, we're in a different time now. Well, what's different now? The difference is that the President of the United States is not Bill Clinton and is not a Democrat, and there's nothing to be gained from going out against Clinton anymore.
Can I add something really quick to that? Because, you know, something that was very poignant at the time. Because as you remember, Oregon Senator Bob Packwood was run out of office for doing stuff
Right
today.
before.
And so there were reporters who asked women's groups, you know, why did you force Packwood out, but you continued to support Bill Clinton? And they said, you know, very hypocritically and quite honestly, well, he's always supported us.
Right.
But is that
Well,
appropriate?
you even
I
hear
mean,
that
did you-
now out of Minnesota with several women say, well, he's for our issues.
Yes.
But I think that if the Democrats had resolved this at the time, the way they are talking about resolving it now, they might not have lost the next two elections.
Sure.
And they're still paying the price for that decision.
Lessons learned, and a real missed opportunity for the Democrats here to get out in front of this, you know, do the right thing as they even kind of mishandled this Al Franken
Finally,
thing.
one of them
Yeah.
kind of took the opportunity.
Sure.
I think that, so good for Christian Gillibrand for saying it. 2 years too late, 5 years too late, 10 years too late, 25 years too late. Totally politically expedient and not courageous really at all, because it's the Captain Obvious statement.
Yep.
Will other Democrats say the same thing? And as we pointed to in the previous segment, if they are the party of women, then they should be taking as hard a line as they believe should be taken in every circumstance, including with Al Franken, but they're not. They're saying, go to the Senate Ethics Committee where our buddies and our pals will exonerate you. That's not a consequence. And so I don't think they've truly learned the lesson. There definitely is a team sport ethos, though. I mean,
agree.
Republicans team up on Democrats and likewise.
Well, I mean, you know, to me, there's a couple of things going on here. First, let me just say, Bill Clinton was impeached. He was impeached. That is the kind of burden he's going to live with for the rest of his life. Everybody say, oh, you were the president that was impeached, and why were you impeached? And it was because of a relationship in which he had power over an intern and allowed a relationship. She says it was consensual, but in my book, I don't see how it can be consensual. Talk about a power differential. The president of the United States and an intern, it's not good. But I will say this. It seems to me that having been impeached and having taken on the bearings of the party that wants to represent the best interest of women, there's no getting away from the charge now of hypocrisy. So what you get is people like some of these Democrats saying, oh, Clinton should have resigned. Or you get writers in Vox and the New York Times even saying, I'm going back to look at this. I think, again, in terms of the team sport aspect, they're protecting themselves against the charge of hypocrisy from Republicans. But do I think that after all this time, and believe me, there were Republicans who attacked women going back, way back, who had charges against Republican men. And now
Gary
all of
Hart
this
had lipstick on his collar, and his political career was closed.
But I'm
Bill
just
Clinton
saying,
was a
that
two-term
goes on.
president
Yeah.
whose wife, if she weren't completely politically inept and totally lacking in self-awareness, she also would have been president. And he enriched himself to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars.
And so he's
I don't
like, who
feel
cares
like
that I got
he paid a
impeached?
political price
didn't care
at all.
at
You
all.
don't think he or she
No.
paid a political price?
She paid
an
a political
asterisk.
price because she wasn't a likable person. She was an awful candidate. and she was
I see.
completely
I thought
toned
you were
down.
relating it to this, but I think
No,
they
he
paid a
almost
price.
drugged her carcass over the
Oh,
finish
well, okay,
line.
okay.
But
I'll let you go with that. But I would just say this, you know. So I wasn't 23. How old were you? 23. I wasn't 23 in that era in Washington. But I got to tell you, I remember going up to Capitol Hill and thinking, what is going on here? The way these guys relate to the women and the way the women dressed. This is not a workplace. This is wild.
On Capitol Hill?
Yeah.
Kidding?
Are you kidding?
Gosh,
Oh,
you
boy.
could come to our office. We got to wear jeans on Friday if our mail was done.
Okay. All right. Well, the fight over tax reform has shifted to the Senate, and the fireworks are flaring already. Things got very heated, very personal between two senators squaring off on the subject. Right back to that next.
Not so for the rest of my life. Time to shoot too low. Won't you pack your bags with me tonight?
President Trump is celebrating his tax reform victory in the House, a bill that passed without a single Democratic vote. The president took the party to task for it in a tweet this morning. Quote, "If Democrats were not such obstructionists and understood the power of lower taxes, we would be able to get many of their ideas into the bill." End quote. The president is promising great results if the tax package passes, but gee whiz, its fate uncertain in the Senate, where tensions are flaring over the legislation.
Before we go home, to just acknowledge, well, this tax cut really is not for the middle class, it's for the rich.
I come from the poor people, and I've been here working my whole stinking career for people who don't have a chance. And I really resent anybody saying that I'm just doing this for the rich. Give me a break. I think you guys overplay that all the time, and it gets old. And frankly, you ought to quit it.
With all due respect, I get sick and tired of the richest people.
Regular order,
in the country
Mr. Chairman.
Getting richer and
Regular
richer.
order.
And richer.
Order.
Regular middle. We do a tax.
Regular order.
Rich and middle class.
Wait a minute.
rates
Regular
over
order.
And over and over again.
Wait just
How
a
many
second.
times?
Wow. So, that gets personal because Orrin Hatch is much respected across the aisle.
Yeah.
And you see Sherrod Brown and Orrin Hatch going at it. I will put aside the substance of it. I will just say that so far, what we've seen, Pete, in the polls is this is not popular with Republicans or Democrats.
Well, let's wait and see how it actually plays out, what actually gets passed. Messaging is going to matter on this.
Yes.
If Orrin Hatch, the last time he got that excited, it was 1986. I mean, Orrin Hatch it's not his
still got it.
personality,
Still
right?
got it.
If he's that frustrated, it shows you how frustrated Republicans are by the incredibly tired and not true argument that this tax reform plan is simply to benefit the rich. If you look at the plan, most of the frustration amongst conservatives is that there are hidden tax brackets and no movement for the rich, and that some of the reductions in deductions and simplification is going to hit the rich. So I wonder when Democrats are going to actually find a talking point on this that is true, and when it turns out to not be true, and this tax cut does help the middle class, those poll numbers are going to boomerang right back in the direction of Republicans. So what is said right now is based on a framing that is totally untrue.
Well, let me just quickly come back to you and say, I think that all the analysis I've seen show disproportionate benefit to corporations, not individuals.
Corporations hire people, including small businesses and large businesses, and many of which have left this country, leaving people to feel forgotten and then pull the level for Donald Trump.
Right,
Yeah,
but
but
I'm-
what
he
would
can
you- what
deliver
would you
those
rather
things.
have? I mean, that
changes
is
the game.
such an empty argument.
What is?
And the idea that corporations are only made up of soulless billionaires, when that's absolutely not true. What would you rather have? A better climate in this country where corporations want to stay here and build things and employ people? Do you know what happens when you lower the corporate tax? Corporations have more money. They can hire more people. They can innovate. They can do things that are impossible when they're shackled by regulations and government. Only big corporations can survive in an overregulated environment because they need tons and tons of lawyers to comply with all of those added federal regulations.
Okay, but I must say that
If you like people, you want to lower corporate tax.
Let me just direct this to Dana, that Gary Cohn, when he was speaking at a Wall Street Journal event this week, asked corporate CEOs, if this passes, are you going to invest more? And few hands went up, and he's like, where are the rest of the hands? What's going on?
I think because they were being honest, because they don't know exactly what's going to happen. They have to wait to see what sort of certainty they can have, and also because there are things like automation that are changing things. And so, regardless, a lower corporate tax is better for the country. The question will be who can win in the messaging war, because Democrats are going to try to do to the Republicans' tax reform plan what Republicans did to Obamacare, which is to drive up the negatives of that so much, regardless of what the actual merits were, and then vice versa. So it just sort of depends. But if the economy continues to do well as it has been, and you get a boost to people in their paychecks, and the corporations see that they can plan to come back to America, I think it'll be hard to say that it wasn't a success.
Kimberly, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, has already said a Republican, has already said he can't support this. That's dragging down the numbers. Then you have people on the line. So what do you think are the chances in the Senate?
I made a bad move by him because he's kind of like standing alone on this. Look, I think there's a lot of pluses to it. And the point is that he's trying to do something that he promised the hardworking men and women in this country, that he was going to do something to give them some more economic opportunity and lower taxes. I mean, that's one of the platforms that he ran on. That's also supposed to be one of the big platforms of the Republican Party to be able to do this. So they're trying to do it effectively. And I think the president has an excellent point when he says that Democrats are being obstructionist because there's things in this that they would like. This is farly a total like handout to the rich. It's not just trying to pull the rich up higher. This is actually trying to do comprehensive reform to be able to move forward. Is there other things that I would like to see in it and be a little bit more aggressive in terms? Absolutely.
Yes,
But they're going to.
Don't delay the corporate, lowering the corporate tax rate.
Absolutely.
Number one. And number two, Johnson is right about that pass-through rate for small businesses and sole proprietorships. And they can actually do a lot more in the Senate. And I think that's a negotiating point for him. I don't think he's a firm no. I think that is such a solid sell. And you're absolutely right. Republicans need to do a much better job of messaging here because
they're also going to lower the top rate.
All right, guys, you know what? We have to run. But believe me, we're going to argue taxes. Don't worry. There's more on this argument. Anyway, pass the mashed potatoes, but hold the politics at the Thanksgiving dinner table this year. We're going to explain what's going to go on over those legs next.
Welcome back to Midtown Manhattan. Well, Thanksgiving, a quintessentially American holiday, is a time for togetherness. So if you want to have that bonding time, you might want to steer clear of politics this year. Last year's Turkey Day fell 2 weeks after the bitterly contested presidential election. New data now shows that dining among politically divided families, those dinners were actually cut short by an average of 20 to 30 minutes just 2 weeks after the election. So maybe stick to talk about food, family, or football next Thursday, but when you're talking about football, maybe stay away from the anthem of controversy. Who here has, divided political families?
No, I divorced. It's very simple.
Now you have all the time you want.
No more Thanksgiving with Nancy Pelosi.
Boy, that was...
Oh, no.
Goodness gracious.
Tell me that didn't happen.
Oh, it did.
We're going to have to hear about that later for sure. This is a working paper one by a couple of professors. They followed 10 million smartphones that were at their house and then went to Thanksgiving and back, and it showed that typically Republicans left a little bit earlier than Democrats. Now, do you have mixed Thanksgiving?
I have mixed every day. Not only am I here with my lovely Republican pals on the five, but if I go home, I've got Republican sons. And if you might say to me, Pete, I can imagine you imagining, Juan, why do you have Republican sons? Why are they so conservative?
Well.
And I think to myself, Pete, have you met their mother?
Oh, really?
But I mean,
do you avoid politics though when it comes to Thanksgiving?
I try to. I was amused by your intro when you were talking about talk football because I mean, gee, we can't even talk football at this table.
It's true.
It's unbelievable.
It's true. How about, I know on the data side, you're probably a little worried, Kennedy, about the fact that 10,000 smartphones are being tracked by location.
Of course. I'm wondering who's doing the tracking. If this is
Santa?
the DEA and
The
law
service called
enforcement and the
Safeguard.
NSA, this is an outrage.
They collected 17 trillion location
markers. If it's a private company, I think it's actually a very interesting way of doing it because, as we know from the presidential election, phone surveys are not all that reliable. Yes. So if you're going to go to the raw numbers, I think it's very interesting, but also for a lot of people. Thanksgiving drags on and on and on. It is an all-day event. And I would say it is the most anxiety-provoking holiday of the year because every other holiday, for better or for worse, is centered around either materialism or sugar. And, Easter also, you get a pass there, but it's usually a Sunday morning brunch after church and whatnot. But Thanksgiving knows no religion. And you could spend all day with your family. And for some people, that's a prison. So what you could do is if you have a Democratic family, you don't want to spend so much time, put on a red MAGA hat and show up and see how quickly your day is cut short.
Well, Dana, to that point, so the snowflakes come back from college and they meet crazy Uncle Joe and everybody else who's got their political opinions and happy to share them. Is there any way to avoid it?
But now, like when you get to Thanksgiving, you already know what your crazy Uncle Joe's position is because you've read it on Facebook. And you've already unfriended him or blocked him if he's liberal or Democrat, doesn't matter. The safest topic at any Thanksgiving table, dogs.
Dogs?
100%. Everybody loves to talk about their dogs. Dogs they
Food
knew.
too.
They
very unifying.
I don't care about food, really.
Dogs.
You know what's funny? Why this year is so much more stressful for people?
Why?
Because last year after the election, first of all, liberals were in shell shock. But then they thought that the results were going to be undone. They really truly thought that this president was not going to be inaugurated on Inauguration Day. And so now they've had an entire year to process their wounded feelings. And there may be even more dejection and depression this year than there was.
Yeah, do you think a more depressing Thanksgiving this year?
I don't
Kimberly?
know. I don't know. I thought it was okay. I thought everything was going to be fine until I heard this. I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving. I'm actually, have Thanksgiving with my son and his grandparents, with my second husband, his family. So we get on very nicely.
And you love food.
I love it. And I cannot wait to just dive into a big thing of mashed potatoes. And I love turkey. So I'm just going to focus on the food. And then we can go from there.
That's where I'm at, folks.
Well, I tell you, I hope somebody rescues me. Maybe they can do the Heimlich on me or something, because they'll say, oh, that
Want me to
crazy
do it?
lip, he's choking on that wing. You know what I mean? And by the way, where'd you get the idea that people were so upset that liberals thought that Trump wouldn't be inaugurated? I didn't have that thought.
What are you, nuts? That's all anyone talked about, was trying to figure out ways to
Before Russia, it was
to
he's not going
flip
to get
the
inaugurated.
results.
On a turkey wing and a prayer. That's what they hope.
We shall see. We'll see how you enjoy your Thanksgiving. Facebook Friday, up next.
Yes.
Just one kiss could stop it spinning. We could
Well, we are ready to rock your Casbah. It is Facebook Friday on the 5.
Sounded so.
You posted your questions. We answer them. Are you ready to go, America?
Yeah.
Blue cards in hand. Let us begin. Kimberly, I will start with you.
Oh, thank you so
Being
much.
a legal scholar.
Yes.
If you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume you had done? That's from Mary M.
They'd assume I'd been framed or somebody was like impersonating
good
me. I mean, I had
answer.
perfect attendance, straight A's. I'm like a very much like law-abiding person, prosecutor. No, they wouldn't assume anything.
No Winona shoplifting? Like,
absolutely not. I'm like the police within myself. Trust me. I don't know. I can't answer that because I totally abhor criminality.
Juan? You're a lawbreaker.
Oh, naturally. They'd assume I'd been in China and saw some Louis Vuitton sunglasses.
Oh my
And then
God.
you have a mean outside shot.
I wish I had like a shot that would have allowed me to play. Is that your alma mater, I believe?
UCLA, yeah. Go Bruins. I still love you.
Pete's a
It
great
would have been for
basketball
assault. It would have been, for
Assault?
Yes, because it would. But I would say it's vigilante justice.
With an axe.
Absolutely, citizens arrest. Okay, let's not play that
flying
tape.
one.
Citizens
I
arrest.
did that one time.
I do not carry an axe with me, and there's a reason.
Wait a second. You're Dirty Harry?
No.
Oh, okay.
He's dirty.
No, but he said he would get involved,
Yeah, I mean, it'd be
I
for
can't
justice.
imagine that.
I can't imagine.
Horse thievery?
I don't know. Didn't turn in my library book on time.
See what I'm saying? This is my sister from another
All right.
mother.
Well, I'll at least be honest. My family would assume it had something to do with Fireball.
Either way,
It's a
good
delicious
assumption.
drink. You know?
I actually like it too.
Yeah, when you
believe
mix
or
it
not.
with Diet Cream Soda, thank me later.
That's like your signature.
What is
And
Fireball?
It's
Oh, wait till the holiday party, Juan.
Okay.
Juan tastes like heaven, burns like hell.
Thanksgiving, America.
Okay.
This is from Michelle W. She asks, if a game from your childhood became a reality show, what game would you like to play?
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Why? Really?
Okay.
It'd be like night games. We used to play
right.
tag at night with run on
Yeah.
people's roofs and go into people's
Flashlights.
backyards with flashlights, and somebody would hide for 2 hours and you couldn't really find them, and then you had to get serious, and maybe they were lost.
Yeah.
Something lost in the neighborhood type scenario.
Dana?
No, well, I was going more along the lines of Candyland.
Oh my God. Did you tell her that answer?
Oh, like actual games.
Yeah, like actual games.
I was going to say candy.
I do think it would. I actually do think it would be pretty fun to have Monopoly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like you
absolutely.
could actually do Monopoly.
Oh
The kind, that'd be fun.
There's so much
Dana's
room for
taking
reality
them
show
all.
with Monopoly.
And I would do Life and Hungry Hungry Hippos.
And Risk.
Oh, I
All
love
right,
that.
Hungry
don't let
Hippos.
Dana say any more. She's taking all the good games. All right. How about Jenga?
Oh, yes.
Yes, I
Could you
like
imagine?
that. Yes, I think it's like great agility,
Or like
and
money.
skill, and like pulling it out.
I mean, but that's what Obamacare is. It's Jenga, and they may have
Right.
just pulled the last cube out. Juan?
Oh, you are such an Obamacare credit. You can't even play without bringing up serious
can't.
topics.
It hurts
All
so good.
Yeah, yeah, that is succeeding. I would say, red light, green light.
Yeah.
I think that's a great game. I don't understand why that's never
That
been
happens out on the street.
Yeah,
every
all the
day.
time.
That's
I think
already
that's a whole
reality.
lot of fun.
You know what?
Yeah.
Well, Frogger's a little dangerous. But how about Red Rover, Red Rover?
Yeah, that would work.
I mean, we could have some bipartisanship there if they played it in
I like that game.
I love that game. That was fun.
I was good at that game.
I
Yeah,
get
you
called
never
over a
played that
lot,
game.
you know.
I could,
All right, let's go on to question number 3. This is from Ellen P. As in, perfect question, Ellen. If you had the power to take one law away, which law would it be?
Federal income tax.
All right. Taxation is theft. Hashtag. Pete?
One federal law away. Today it would be Obamacare, lock, stock, and barrel.
All right. Juan?
Well, I guess, I think this question's come before but I don't think it was federal because I said jaywalking because I jaywalk all the time. I'm
It's
lucky.
not federal. It's any law.
Oh, it's any law? I thought it was a federal law.
choose. No, choose your own adventure.
Oh, well, then I think,
Well, I said federal income tax because I'm a conservative, and states can do what they want.
Yeah, they absolutely can do what they want. Go to a fair tax, a consumption tax. Enough of this income tax, this cash grab. That is
Yes,
unconstitutional.
I'm with you. That's got to go.
All right,
Boom.
Kimberly Guilfoyle. We got one more question to go. So one law repealed. What's gone?
I'm with you. I don't want the income tax.
No, we don't want the income tax. I
Tired
would
of it.
also reschedule marijuana. Anyhow,
I'm not with you.
No,
on
we're
that
not
one.
with you on that
Party
one.
has
Oh, I think, well, finally, we have a breakthrough here.
Yeah.
Finally.
yeah, there
What?
you
You
go.
like it?
I don't,
You
but
don't have to like it to
I'm
love
just-
freedom. Okay, quickly from Pam R. Do you have a reoccurring dream? And what is it?
Yeah.
And why do you have it? What is it?
Being late to this show.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank goodness you're on.
Getting hit by a Mack truck.
What?
God, that's terrible.
It's okay.
I think I'm so boring on this because it's the same thing that I'm not ready for a test.
Oh, okay. Kimberly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like a test or, a class or something like that, but nothing really bad, no recurring.
No, I have a college dream where I've signed up for a full load at UCLA.
Right.
In my current job with my current family. It's 2 weeks before finals and I've done none of the work.
That happens to me sometimes too.
yeah.
I'm like, whoa, what happened?
And then I wake up in a cold sweat, so relieved.
And then you remember that you got straight A's. And that's
And so relieved that one more thing is next. Stay right.